The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Science of Triangles broadcast. I'm afraid I'm going to be afflicted here with a little bit of morning voice. Some of you may have been with us last night, at least night in Europe, and let's see, we were dealing with the identification as being. Well, all of these esoteric sciences interlock with each other and all affect each other. So this gets a little perhaps more technical. I'm sorry for that extra voice from the bottom of the barrel kind of thing. So this is more DK's work specifically. And I just want you to think for a moment of this vast heavenly canopy. We're surrounded by these demonstrations of beings, apparently in space. At least that's the way it appears to us. And realize that there are special relationships. In a way, everything is related to everything else. That is probably true. But there are special relationships. And as we progress in our work and our sensitivity, those relationships will be made clear. Now, one relationship we certainly don't have to cultivate is the relationship between Earth and Mars, or between what we might call the lower part of the base of the spine and the solar plexus energy. No problem there. We somehow receive that all the time. But there is another relationship in that, which is to the planet Venus. And that's what our solar logos is trying to bring into focus, and certainly our planetary logos. Because Venus represents the great, just the way, if we could but realize it and feel it and fathom it, we would find the solar angel. Once a human being in a previous solar system, we would find the solar angel representing the great ideal for us. And that's what we're going to have to learn as we tread the pathway which leads up to release. So right there you have such an important triangle: Venus, Mars, and the Earth, or basically the illumined mental body, the astral body of Mars, and the Earth representing, terra firma, the base of the spine, and our practical life on this planet. Well, Thus it is, as we look up, so many relationships that we know nothing about. I mean, just think of it this way. It's as if our solar system, with all its planets, is an advanced cosmic, in a way, cosmic group. And with the solar logos, they are running the cosmic process for the duration of the solar system. It's as if, we sat in a room meditating with our peers, each of whom was assigned a different task, and we would be related and interrelated to these other people as we tried to manage whatever project was required of us. And thus will go farther and farther, these great groups, if I can call it that way, a group of planets, a group of stars, like it's called the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. Then a group of constellations, and a group of constellations, and on it will go, this group idea in getting the universe back together. We will form groups. The law of group progress is not just a human law, but can be adapted to many different kinds of beings. Imagine a group of galaxies sitting in conference, determining how to manage local space, each of which was in relation to every other one, and maybe some especially so. So the construction of our universe, about which we authentically know so little, begins to look like a pretty amazing thing. And we're getting practice as we, especially in the Aquarian age, learn the group method. In all the esoteric training that is in line with the Aquarian age, the group process is there. And in the 12-step programs, that help people be relieved of their conditions, the group idea is there too. In fact, we can do more together at whatever level we stand, and each one will have a particular function. And all of that will come under the guidance of the 7 rays and under the great triplicity of aspect, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, and so forth. So I think, although we live in very stressful times, on a very stressful planet. How would you like to live on a planet where what you learn is releasing sorrow and purifying pain? Well, apparently it's the fastest way, given the condition of the monads that are drawn to this planet. So, we have quite a task, and it's painful here. At the same time, progress is being made, and the catching up of our planetary expression with that of Venus is within process at the moment. We can think very, very big about these things, or we can think minutely and specifically enough to advise people how they can take their next step. Because that's what you have to know. You have to know your constitution of man and your next step. And when you know that, you know a lot. You know a lot. Okay, well, now it looks like we have gathered here, and from all over the world, really. I just want to say hi to you, to Annette, and to Asha, and to Barbara, and to Brennan, Catherine, and Dana Marie, and to Frederick, Karen, and Leslie, Lynette, and Mariana, and Margaret. Let's just, yeah. To Martha Nicholson, Natney, and Nesa, and to Nienke, Rebecca, and Risto, and to Stephen, Down Under, Tia, and TU, and Vera, Winnie, and Zenaidi, and Veronica. And Michael and I are, Michael and I, oh goodness, my mouse is freezing, but okay. I think I need to turn this computer off sometimes. It's on a pretty long time, and I think it gets a little bit overloaded, I think I'll write a sort of an autobiographical something called the Overloaded Life. All righty. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. Now we're talking about integration. That's where we ended, and it's a very solid figure, the triangle. It's very archetypal. It has so much to do with the stability of our cosmos, especially in its higher aspects. So just a couple of things to read, and just hoping that you're not hearing the bells I'm hearing. Okay, here we go. The science of triangles is related to the total expression of the divine triplicity of manifestation: will, love, and intelligence. And maybe we put those together in another way: life, consciousness, and form. But as I said before, life is, in a way, something different than any of the aspects which come out of life, such as will, love, and intelligence. So until, therefore, the disciple can express in himself the integrated resemblance to these three aspects, he will not be able to grasp the meaning of this subjective and astrological science. So as we cultivate will, love, and intelligence, and they become realities to us, the meaning of the science of triangles and our imitation of the much greater, though parallel aspects, will come home to us. And number two, on our planet, the science of triangles, let's really note this, is related to the three major aspects as they express themselves through Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity. Now, humanity is very real to us. The other two, we probably don't have a whole lot of experience with, especially with Shambhala. Again, therefore, we come up against the need to approach the integrated human being. Now that's my point. We are moving all steadily towards integration. And, many of us, we're not yet totally integrated. We don't have body, emotion, and mind working in a coordinated manner. It's always something is messing up the coordinated activity of these three. So we need to approach the integrated human being, because to this, looking at how this science relates to that human being, because only the man, and this is the important one, who is responsive to these three focal points of energy can understand their interplay. And we've taken out that map where the arrows show where we stand now, because for each center there is a different interrelation. Only in fact can the man apprehend the underlying truth whose two head centers, and I suppose by that we're going to mean the great head center and the Ajna center and his heart center between the shoulder blades, form a triangle of flowing energies. So if we want to apprehend the truth, certain flows of energy within our etheric system and other systems have to be operative. And thereby purifying and by practice and by making the personality do what you, the disciple, the soul in incarnation, know is best. Only that way does the truth come. Okay. Now, here we are where we were going to begin. Just take a second here. So here we say further, and probably I'll be able to speak smoothly when the program is over. All righty. In this connection, I would remind you of what I said earlier in the treatise that the science of triangles is related to spirit and synthesis. Now, if you go into the astrological chart, according to the way that the masters interpret it, black squares represent events and oftentimes difficult events. Yellow stars, he adds the color so that everything is quickly apprehended, represent the growing of consciousness. And blue triangles represent the presence of the spirit. Let's think about those three geometrical figures. And the colors that alert the masters to the nature of them. One of the colors, it's an exoteric color for Saturn, is black. I mean, if you, that tabulation in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1 is so good. And I'll see if I can find it. I'm not doing too well. Right there. I'll just go to page 420. But I better check a book before I do that. Okay. So here is ray 3, and it is conducted via the very important and ancient planet Saturn. And notice, it's given an esoteric color and an exoteric color, which is black. And so black Saturn represents deep form. Now Mercury will be given the color yellow, I think. And Jupiter, one of the major planets of synthesis, will be given the color blue. So, you know what's really interesting? The masters simplify their astrology as they proceed. Now they know so much more by being able to look within from a number of different angles. They know more than we do when we interpret a chart, but it's so interesting how, as we climb the ladder of perception and capacity, everything gets simpler. So we have to remember that. And then we finally come to the simplicity of Shambhala, by which the whole planet is directed, no matter what complexities eventuate below. I'm trying a little water as a kind of a vocal lubricant, and it does work for about a minute. All righty. Now going back. So, the spirit of synthesis. Now, you know what? If you want to get into one of the real new esoteric schools, the kind that will appear when the great Lord again begins his mission on earth, there are many qualifications, but your thought has to be animated by the spirit of synthesis. And I might say the spirit of articulated synthesis. I was talking to my son the other night, and we were saying, well, what's the difference between infinity, the infinity of the absolute, and the articulated infinity of everythingness, absolute infinity. And there is a difference. There are just no parts and pieces to the substance out of which all things come. And all those articulations, you've seen it, haven't you? The continuity bar. Let's see if I can show that to you. I know you've seen it. And I don't know where to look. Sanskrit. Words. Well, here are Sanskrit words, but looks like they're put in English. Let's try one other thing. Well, I guess if we look over here on the right, we'll see some ancient texts. I'm not sure this is, yeah, there we go. All right, well, it just appeared in front of my eyes. The language of the gods. Notice and compare to Indian music the letters, the origin of the letters and words at the left. Those words arise from continuity. So it's a simple analogy. Every word is different. There's lots of distinction. One thing is separated from another, and yet what they come out of is all the same continuity. So the absoluteness, or even what God, the transcendental God, can see of itself. That's the continuity. And out of that comes all of the differentiation. Now, sometimes some of you have heard and you've enjoyed Indian music, and you notice how what they've got going is kind of a pedal tone. Bong. It stays the same the whole time. That's the continuity. But out of it comes all of the different notes and combinations of notes and all the differentiation of this cosmos of music. That's what comes out of it. Okay, there we go. So that analogy is so good, I think, because out of the homogeneous, super universal, substantial state arises infinite differentiation. And, you know, in a way that should not be mistaken, because it can be like used for very inflated purposes. Out of you has come all things and all universes. Now just think about that for a minute. Out of you, all things have arisen. Now, that's going to be misunderstood immediately, and people are going to think of the personal you. But you know that's not what I'm talking about. Out of essential you, all things arise. It's for those people who are feeling like a victim in life and that things just aren't going right, this is a very different thought, and puts you in a superior place, and one that reveals the potentials of what it is to be a human being, or what it is to ascend higher to one's original state. Okay. Now, I'm not making a lot of progress here, but okay. And hopefully these bells will soon cease. I would remind you that also that what I've written in this astrological section of the treatise on the seven rays, that is intended for the instruction of disciples at the close of this century and during the post-war period. Well, that's certainly including us, isn't it? In other words, we had better take into consideration what is offered here. A lot of things have arisen and gotten in the way of real in-depth study. Don't forget, the Christ was to have appeared in the late 20th century. I don't see how you can interpret some of the sentences in Initiation Human and Solar in any other way. But the schedule had to be slowed down because of atomic energy, I think. Anyway, this is for our use at last. So many people in the beginning and working with Master DK in the 1930s and even 40s, 20s, never really got to see the majority of this material all brought together in a synthesis. But from 1960 onward, the synthesis of the material was there and presented. There's such a satisfaction in seeing the articulated synthesis of all related factors. And we have that possibility now. I know seems like a long time ago, 1960, and that's even 11 years after Alice Bailey passed on. That's 60 years ago. But think, what have we absorbed? What do we understand? What can we really apply? It's not enough. Given what we've been given, it's not enough. So I would recommend that to everybody. So disciples arrive in the post-war period. Many of us are of that nature. And our disciples at the close of the 20th century and beyond. And some of you are newer and coming in as younger people, and will have the immediate advantage of the next installment of the teaching. Also, he says, I would point out that I stated earlier, this science must always be approached from the angle of the three basic energies. That is, those coming from the Great Bear, from the Pleiades, and from Sirius. Now, you know, if some of you maybe have a very good sense of proportion, and you may be bothered, as I sometimes am, when I see these three together. The Pleiades is a very large cluster. It has some 800 and something stars in it, and I think more will be discovered. The Great Bear is a moderate size asterism, gathering of stars in a constellation that maybe has, I don't know, about 144. It would be a significant number, 144 stars in it, with 7 of them major. And what about Sirius? Single star, except for Sirius A, Sirius B, and those types of esoteric relations, but smaller. And yet these constellations, disproportionate as they are in size and magnitude, seem to have something similar going on in their effect, the magnitude of their effect upon humanity. So unless we can think of Great Bear, I guess every radiologist constantly thinks that way. Sirius, a local cosmic Christ, and the Pleiades, the hub of the wheel, we're not going to get the synthetic nature of the science of triangles. Okay. So, we all know it takes a lot of study. Everything depends on what you really want. You ignore certain things and apply your attention to certain things based on whether you want them or not. And that leads us to our sense of values, what we truly value, which has to be examined. So the three basic energies you can approach the science. It's not the total cosmic approach. It's what I would call the local cosmic approach within our particular one about whom naught may be said. There's probably, look here, I would say 49 approaches that we're looking at, and maybe 50. And one of them, and only one of them, is the foundation of all that we see in triangular configuration. All right. So, because conditioned by time and space, these three types of energy pour through the three major centers: Shambhala, the hierarchy, and humanity. And you probably know which is which, do you not? The Great Bear through Shambhala, Sirius and associated occult and hidden stars through the hierarchy, and then Pleiades, strangely, as vast as it is so much associated with the third aspect of divinity that it pours through the throat center, which is humanity. Now, a hidden little reference, it tells us how the Pleiades are related to stimulating the solar angels, and indeed it does do so. Okay. I keep on taking this water, trying to, get some smoothness into the presentation. My problem, he says, and don't think for a minute that presenting even the portion of the ageless wisdom which he has presented is not a big problem, how to do it in the best way. My problem has been to choose which of the myriad, I think the word is used in a general sense, not just 1,000, but the many, many, many interlocking triangular relationships I would take up with you. He could get into the irrelevant. He could do every one of them, and not all of them are relevant at this time to our life process. And so he's had a problem here, which ones to talk about, and thus present this science in such a manner that it would prove of real interest. Has it done so? That's a question you can ask yourself. The inner web of light, which is called the etheric body of the planet, is essentially, not yet perhaps, but on its way, a web of triangles. And when the evolutionary process is completed, this web will have been organized. At present, and this is the relativity of things under the law of mutation. At present, a pattern of squares is the major construction of the web, just as it may be for, the non-sacred human being. I mean, I think when starting out, a lot of us have square relations, unmediated by the greater velocity which is offered through triangular relations. At present, a pattern of squares is the major construction of the web, but this is slowly changing, and the divine pattern works out. It's on its way, It's just a question of the timing. How soon do we let the divine into our lives? How soon? We have the choice. Okay, so here's this interesting thing about how to turn a square into a triangle. This is done by the creation of division. What's he saying here? By the application of the law of separation, but also by the recognition in consciousness of duality. This is the objective and subjective methods of turning the square into the triangle. Now let's see. How far do we go here? Right. The application of directed motion and the appearance of two triangles in the place of one square. Now here is the old Pythagorean idea. I'll just bet my bottom dollar on the thought that Pythagoras instructed his student about how to do this. I won't read all the things I've brought into the picture. This can be found on Makara and I believe on YouTube. Maybe one or two people has made it all the way through. And you can see my own writing compared with that of the Tibetan as I try to make his writing more accessible. Okay. Okay. So when this has taken place, the perceiving consciousness recognizes identity as a soul. The triangle also being the symbol for the soul. Now, that interesting statement that I've often quoted here. These words were once spoken to me by an ancient seer who bisected the square esoterically, thus forming two triangles and united them in a fresh manner to form a star of life. And, it seems to me that what's happening there, one of the things that could be seen as happening, we start with a square, we go along the diagonal and get a duality of two triangles, and then we rearrange the triangles to form the symbol of the monad, the six-pointed star. It was, by the way, Akbar's great symbol. And if you ever have the good fortune to go to his city, which is called Agra in India, on the buildings, his buildings, the six-pointed star is always to be found. Okay. And maybe we'll end with this and take up next time what the new astrologer, the astrologer of the future, will do. Now, this business of the rearrangement of triangles in order to form stars is epitomized here. It is for this reason that the astrologers of the future, and there will be many representing this greatest and oldest of all the sciences, it is for this reason that the astrologers of the future will emphasize the relation and the interrelation of triangles. Now, one of the tests that I'm going to give us before long, we haven't much more to go before such a test will be relevant. As you know, the person who's done probably more work on triangles than anyone I know is a starting David Hunter. And he's collected so many references from the books. And each one of those triangles he's collected has a meaning. Now, the question is, will we know how to get to that meaning? I can give you many triangles. Can you give me back meanings at different times when a different planet or sign is in the ascendancy? Remember, all of these are triangles in rotation. When you are a beginning human being, the major triangles of your system have in the position of eminence the third ray point. As initiation approaches, the triangle revolves, and you have the second ray point move into the position of greatest control. And then finally, in that period, when you are cultivating the spirit, is any of us truly doing that? Maybe a little. The point, which represents the first ray, rotates and is at the apex and represents the strongest factor. I think that's very interesting. So, look, when you look at the cosmos, it's not static. Everything is in constant motion, and every one of these triangular relationships, according to the law of mutation, is changing the position of its members. I think that if you were with two other people and you had some kind of productive unit, it would go that way too. A lot of practical details on the outer side would be in accordance with the second ray, and then the harmonious influence of the triangle would be under the second ray. So third ray, second ray, if I'm correct. And then finally, the meaning, the purpose, the final placement of that triangle and its effect upon the will of others would be represented by the first ray member of the triangle. Now look, if all this seems to be quite complicated, and believe me, on a morning when I've been up very late the night before, it does seem complicated to me at times, but I know it's learnable. And pretty soon, you can be part of the law of mutation. You can look up there, out there, and within your etheric body, and you say, this is the rotation going on now. And I'm sure that as you mature in your life and mature spiritually, that all these rotations are occurring or beginning to occur anyway. Now, we cannot stand in a position where we say, okay, next. No. There's a design behind the whole thing, and we don't control that design. We do not. I would just say the solar angel controls that design, just as it is an expert alchemist and manipulates all of these permanent atoms and the devas associated with them. Life is terribly complex and terribly simple at the same time. But if Master DK was a student, probably, I don't know, for 5,000 years, it's a wild guess, but certainly since the time of Pythagoras, we can undertake, all of us, regardless of what our ray may be, we can undertake the great study which will deliver to our consciousness the many factors which determine the structure and progress of our life. Okay. I'm just really hoping that you do not hear what I'm hearing. and I would like to eliminate it if I could. Look what he says here. Look what he says. I'll come back to it. I could fill many volumes with the indications of the various triangles. In other words, not only what the triangle is, but what are its implications? What does it touch? Who and what does it affect? The indications of the various triangles as they are discovered to be related in time and space. We'll come to that a little later. So this will be it for the moment. I've probably spoken more than enough, and you know, when you have one of those late nights and early mornings, you can imagine, plus vocal cords that won't work. Oh, golly. Yes, we get into something very practical in just a short time. So this is the end of 65. And I hope I have it clearly. The next one being 66. And we're going to, come on. Next time we're together, and it will be the 12th. Abraham Lincoln's birthday, an exemplary Aquarian, someone who was an avatar for humanity. And I can only, whoever he is, wherever he is, and probably an initiate of the 4th degree. By this time, you can imagine what it took to hold this union together. In his Gettysburg Address, he just a few words, 360, 70, 80 words. You know, the 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And then he goes on to say that proposition is being tested, whether a nation thus conceived can long endure. And we can ask that of our democracies in the world, because always democracies have been overcome by ambitious people, whether it's a Julius Caesar who crossed the Rubicon and opened the door to a succession of egotistical emperors, most of them, or whether it's what's going on in the political arena today. So anyway, we'll work on this the next time. And by that time, I hope the shock of these sounds that are constantly ringing would have been solved. Okay. Now there's still a few of you left. And I'd like to know, are there any questions or statements you would like to write down in the chat box or the question box? Just review what we've talked about in these few pages. How to bisect a square esoterically. What will be the implications of the two divisions of a square? Okay. What you see, Michael? Anything?
I'm not seeing any hands or questions. I was wondering if there might be some relationship between the brief discussion in this section on triangles and squares and how, as astrologers, look at trines and squares and the way those energies interact and relate.
Yeah. So the essence of your question, if you could put it as succinctly as possible, would be, I just want to make sure I grasp it.
Is there a relationship between the trines and squares in astrological charts and the triangles and squares that are discussed here?
Yes, yes, yes. I think so. I think there can be a very close relation. In other words, the general theme of these zodiacal heavenly triangles and the planetary heavenly triangles can be located in the chart. And they will often give hints as to what the individual is capable of achieving, what energies he can draw upon in trying to achieve it. And I think there's a pretty good parallel. But so much, Michael, in my view anyway, will depend upon the stage of evolution at which a person finds himself. Now, for instance, I've sometimes given you, everybody, the triangle Cancer, Leo, Aquarius. Okay. Mass consciousness, individual consciousness, group consciousness. Obvious enough, right? But how the triangle is interpreted will depend upon where a person stands on the ladder of evolution. Now, if I'm dealing with a, average, non-aspiring person who has not distinguished himself or herself from the mass, I might really emphasize Cancer. And I talk about the movement towards Leo. If I'm dealing with someone for whom that inchoate light is focalizing as a sharp point of individuality, I'm in the Leo phase. But is that person in the Leo phase, we'd have to see. You know, when you're looking at, I don't know, TV, you just see a lot of people in the very, very strong Leo phase. They don't want to be behind the scenes. They want to be right out there in front, proving themselves. And the arising of certain programs, you know, I don't know the names of them all, you know, the X Factor and US Talents and Britain Has Talents and all that. It's so Leo. These are people emerging from the mass and standing out distinctly. Now, what if they've gone beyond that? And what if group cooperation and group creativity and group ensemble, you might say, like an orchestra, a dance troupe, etc. What if they're the director of such a thing? They're into the Aquarian phase. So here's the thing. When you see a triangle, you know it's going to reflect something that's in the heavens because it has those potentials. But in the horoscope, how is the person using it? Now, we're going to get into a section here where he's going to talk about the sun, moon, and rising sign. But, you know, the question is, are you a laggard moon type? Are you a self-presenting sun type? Or are you a soul-seeking rising sign type? And that's the evaluation, which can never be done. You know, we can't do it perfectly. A master can, there it is. It's type before him. He does it perfectly. We can't. But we can get an idea. And we know a lot of people who would totally reject what we're talking. Doesn't make sense. I'm not interested. It has no relevance, you know, to real, what they would call progress and so forth. So let's get very sharp in finding what distinguishes the sense of values of one person from another, because it's according to people's desires and the resultant sense of values that you can distinguish on the ladder of evolution one individual from another. So the answer, from my point of view, to your question is yes. I know it took a long time to get to yes, but as in heaven, so in the individual horoscope.
Well, blessings to Anne Veronica. She writes, many thoughts. 1. The order for today is Black Anticorona Sun equals Saturn, Neptune, Uranus equals personality, soul, monad. 2. I couldn't miss the fact that the division of the square gave 2 triangles. Could this mean the soul and the solar angel and a lot more? 3. You said that the signs are devas and they surround the earth. You also said probably the sun has different signs. Through the law of, and it goes on and I can't, oh, here it is. Through the law of analogy, could the human being have its own personal 12 signs, Davis, that are working with him?
You know, I've often thought so, and Veronica, and I've often thought that the zodiac in some way, like the sections of an orange, which are spherical, they're called lunes, Lunes, and they're part of the sphere. I've often thought that our vehicles rotate, and that there's a certain measure by which they rotate. I don't know if they rotate exactly in line with the rotation of our planet, but I think that you're onto a good thought, because we have our own system. Now, I'm not sure whether the etheric body rotates. I'm not sure. But that the astral body rotates, I think so. And therefore, you know, we come up with different emotional phases at various intervals. Does the mental body rotate? Yes, I think so. What about the causal body? Yes, I would say there is rotation there, and the different cycles we go through and the different ways we approximate the energies available depend upon the speed of the rotation. What about those other higher vehicles? Well, we're not into them very much yet, but the mental vehicle gets organized on the highest level of the mind. The Buddhic vehicle is organized mostly after the third initiation. The Atmic vehicle will have to be organized after the fourth initiation. Will they rotate? Almost certainly, yes. Now it's a big science, and the timing of all that and as to how it affects our life is still a bit of a mystery to us, but the solar angel will know. Now you say, you know, I think it's number 5, isn't it? But you can do it this way: Sun, black, Antakarana, Sun, black, Antakarana. You can do black, Sun, black, Antakarana, Sun. You can manipulate them in a variety of ways and explain how it is and what you mean. In discipleship in the New Age, I believe it's the 5th formula, isn't it? So when you say for today, it's black Antakarana Sun, I'm not sure how you're determining that, like for today, but let's just say that in fact, yes, that is a legitimate sequence. And it means to me, if I was to look at it, I'm in ignorance, black Saturn. But there's a way out of ignorance, and it is a bridge of light, which I learn how to build. And finally, if I build it correctly, I achieve the illumination of the sun, the triad, and the monad. Now, that's where most of us are right now. From ignorance through a bridge of light to illumination. But how about this? How about Sun, Antakarana, black? I'm sure you have your own ideas. It's actually a very advanced stage. From the sun of the personality, integrated, radiant, powerful, through whatever means necessary, symbolized by the Antakarana. We reach the black light of Shambhala, which is so bright it appears as blackness to us. So it's fun to put those things in different order and justify what they may mean, because every order that you can find here would have a reasonable explanation if we could find that explanation. Now, the two triangles that the square is divided into, well, you know, it's whenever you're dealing with the solar angel and the soul, it's difficult to differentiate. Soul is a state of consciousness. It involves the contribution of the solar angel as the angel of the presence. It involves the contribution of our monad. It's all, it's soul. Another division, which is almost certainly true, is the higher triad and the lower triad as represented by the six-pointed star. And basically, the lower triad is lower mind, astral, and then etheric physical. And then above it, however you want to arrange that, Atma Buddhi Manas. And how shall you do it? You know, will mind represent Atma? Always. Emotion represents Buddhi. Will the physicality of man represent the mentality of the triad, or do you invert it? See, you know, you can look at the higher triangle as standing like this or as inverted, and each way is correct, if you can explain it, basically. So yes, as you say, you have many thoughts, good thoughts, and yeah, you know, I'll tell you what, go back to the year, I think it's 1917. There's that wonderful movie out about that, you know, and I recommend it. As I don't get to see a lot of movies, but lately, but I did see this one, and 1917, powerful World War I film. I can tell you, you would not have wanted to be in the trenches. But anyway, I think in the year 1917, Alan Leo almost 20 years before the Tibetan published his esoteric astrology book, or at least, you know, wrote the segments that people studied, Alan Leo had a book called Esoteric Astrology. Now, if you know Theosophy, you can make your way through that book. And it was there that the idea of the lunes was discussed. Those sections of Devic substance which are attuned to the lunes of the sun and to the constellations. Now, you know, we're not getting a direct shot from these greatly organized centers of expressive energy, but we are getting a a conditioning beam which conditions a tuned Davic substance around the earth to be in line with those great constellations. And then when it comes to acting out on the earth, the nature of that energy, it will have been modified and transformed so we can use it. So from the real thing to the representative devas to the adaptation and use by man. Now, okay, that's all pretty esoteric. It's not much discussed. And the loons have a lot to do with tropical astrology and where the spring equinox really begins. As far as the lunes of the sun, I just found it to be a necessity and have something to do with the tropical situation in which our whole solar system exists at any one time. So indeed, you have asked some questions with some pretty profound implications.
Michael, would you like to take Vera's question or comment? She has had her hand raised.
Yeah, I'll do that, Michael. And then there's a little more here from Anne Veronica, sort of releasing her fifth ray, it looks like. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Vera. Yep, go ahead.
In this webinar, Michael, you mentioned this triangle Venus, Mars, Earth. And in the morning triangle, or your evening one, the last identity one, you mentioned polar opposite of Earth. And I was thinking probably Venus. And can you please comment on this polar opposite in this triangle and the triangle? How does it relate?
Well, you know, you have a couple of choices as what will be your polar opposite in any triangle. It just so happens that when looking at duality, even if it's part of a triangle, Venus and Earth are, from one perspective, great opposites because Venus is there's a lot we can say here. Venus is a star turned upright. Earth is a star which is both upright and inverted. Mars, the non-sacred planet of this triplicity, is a star, five-pointed star, inverted. So in any triangle, there's going to be a highest member. And we might say that the Earth logos is such a student of Venus that the opposition is there. Now, should I have said polar opposite? There are a lot of differences between what goes on Earth and Venus, but there are also tendencies on Earth which begin to imitate Venus and don't, you know, pull in the opposite material direction. And we're becoming more and more like Venus. You know what the Tibetan said, we're meant to be at the same stage of evolution as Venus, but we're not. So Earth is very in between. And you know how you can tell that? The symbol for Venus, you know, circle above the cross. Symbol for Earth, cross within the circle. In other words, the spirit is not so liberated. And then Mars, one of the symbols for Mars is the cross above the circle. And that shows you their relative degree of development. Now, in a way, Mars is always opposite Venus. And that's why they make kind of a planetary pair, you know, they are the lovers in a way, and they're very attracted to each other like polar opposites would be. Earth is sometimes the polar opposite when it's imitating Mars, which it does, and sometimes much closer to approximating Venus. Earth is, what does he say? Inwardly a sacred planet. Mars just is not. So that's a little amplification on what I meant, which I hope carries it closer to the truth. Now, you can also do Mercury, Venus, and the Earth. Leave Mars out of it. Venus then is Kama Manas, and Mercury is the mind. Instead of Venus being the mind soul, with Mars being the astral body. So different angles on these things can be achieved when you make different combinations. There's all kinds of triangles that are important in our solar system. If I say, you know, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, there's just so much you can make out of that. You know, and out of the 3 signs which they particularly rule, which would be Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And I could go around picking things out. There's another, I mean, it's so interesting. If we have time, I hope we can do it. Vulcan, Venus, and Mars. Okay. Now, you know, mythology says, look, Venus is always running around with Mars. But Vulcan wakes up one day and notices this is going on and catches them in a net. And that's the end of playtime. And Vulcan represents the spiritual will. Venus, again, the attractive power of the astral body. And in this case, Mars represents physical body, sexuality, materialism. It has a different meaning in that context. Yeah. So, you know, we could, and then I did that long ago. And I don't know, I hope I haven't lost it. My daughter transcribed it. I went from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night out into the woods, into the mountains of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was just me and my tape recorder. And I went through all of these combinations, all of them. And then I really know what the Tibetan means when he says, look, I have a lot of choices here. I better give you the relevant ones because there are too many if I start giving you everything. But basically what's important for students such as we are is to understand how you interpret planetary triangles, how you interpret the zodiacal triangles, and then, you know, when you start making combinations of them, how you do it. And then, of course, if you want to know that, you've got to know a little something about each member of the triangle. So it's a bit of a study, isn't it?
Yeah.
And let's just say, look, is the personality the opposite of the soul? In a way, yes.
Yes.
And personality can really turn down. Then you get the left-hand path and all the rest. But personality can also be a 5-pointed star and start turning up toward the soul, toward Venus, a sacred planet. And that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to pull in opposite directions. Look what's happening in the United States. The Gemini personality is out of hand. War between idealisms, and the idealisms are even limited. It's not meant to be forever, that particular war. Whatever represents the higher of the ideals should turn, or the other way around, the lower of the ideals should turn towards the higher and attune and align with it. Right now, we think of these idealisms as equal, but they're not. One is blue and one is red. And you can take the implications for yourself. One is the color of Jupiter, and the other is the color of Mars. What's supposed to happen? Not what's happening now. So the splits are not meant forever, but Christ did say, and we've got to take it into consideration, and why he said it, I come to bring not peace, but the sword.
Yeah.
In other words, please discriminate. He says, so please discriminate between personality, evil and limitation, and soul, spirituality and liberation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Vera, you bet. Okay, little more here. Now let's see if I understand everything here. And Veronica, you're really on the productive side this morning. So, okay, right, we went as far as the rotating vehicles around man. How very interesting that we are like the solar system with these different, we're like an atom, the different shells around the central nucleus. And for us, there is rotation of the constituents of each shell. Probably alignment in one means they all have the, let's see if I got this, they all have the same vibration. You know, Michael, I lose it here.
Probably alignment in one means they all have the same vibration, the point when matter destructs.
Okay. In other words, the sameness of vibration yields its transformation, which is in a way the same as destruction of the rate of vibration that it represented before. Now, as far as the actual destruction of matter, I think we're into a different thing there. But in other words, what you're saying, look, is the sun, black anticorona, and so forth, that occurs on different days, maybe for different people. I want to expand that whole consideration and say that it occurs in different phases of life, early, middle, and late. And if you want to see what early, middle, and late look like, go here to esoteric astrology and plug in 331. Let's see what happens. Not much is happening here, except the bells are ringing. Wait a second. Is it 332? No, that's not it. Oh, how could I forget that one? It can't be. It's the place where we have undeveloped man, a developing man, and a disciple and initiate. So I think it is. I wonder, Michael, do you remember where that one is? I could go looking for it, but I really don't want to right now. 333, I can try that. And meanwhile, the bells are ringing. There. I was one page short. Here we have it. Undeveloped man, advanced man, but not necessarily spiritual, and disciple initiate. All right. Now I have to quickly get back to attendees. I'm having Michael freezing of the cursor. Right. So totally there are only 6 different orders. Division and separation bring the consciousness of duality, agreed. Apply directed motion, yes. And the 2 higher triangles, the triad and the soul, appear or can appear. And I guess it also depends on which way we turn a triangle in rotation. Now, for us, the triad is becoming relevant just now. For the masters of the 5th degree and beyond, the triangle is where they live, the spiritual triad. For the Chohan and the Chohan of the 7th degree, the highest of all triangles, let's call it the monadic triangle, is where they live. And some have thought there must be a triangle in the sea of fire. Why? Because it's the home of whom? Yeah, it's the home of Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. So indeed, a triangle fits there. And when Tui and I were making these charts, we put it in there just to etch it in for future discussion. Mostly, except for his charts, the Tibetan stops with will, wisdom, and activity. But up here, the Buddhas of activity and Sanat Kumara are found in relation to the triangles. Okay, and maybe the two higher triangles, the triad and the soul appear. Don't forget the monad when you're looking for high triangles. Okay. Well, I'm hoping that some questions have been answered. It's about time to look at leaving this particular session. And I just want to say that if you despair of learning these different groupings, categories, planets, suns, constellations, don't despair. If you want to learn them, you will learn them. So the question is simply your own motivation. Okay. Anything else, Michael?
No other hands raised or questions entered in the chat box.
Okay. Now, my apologies for this sort of morning voice and conditions of fatigue that come from sleeplessness. But we have a lot to go over and a lot to assimilate. And we want to fill in the picture of the universe that we have with meticulous entirety. So this evening, we will have our normal person-to-person Triangles broadcast at the usual YouTube address. And the next morning, as I said, the evening reappearance of the Christ. And on Friday, we will have Glamour in the evening and also Cosmic Fire in the evening so far. And then it reverts back to the normal program. So if you have questions about this stuff, and I have the time, I'm happy to give you the short version, and maybe it will be of assistance to you. Yeah.
I would like to add that Saturday is the pre-full moon webinar. Notification to be coming out soon. And then Sunday the 9th at 6 a.m. GMT is the full moon meditation broadcast for Aquarius.
Great. Okay. So Tuya does the broadcast. I'll do the pre-full moon as usual. I think I'm at 8 o'clock in the evening, isn't it? GMT?
Yes, the pre-full moon is, yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. And then Tuya always times it so that the full moon occurs somewhere in the center of the broadcast. Okay, friends.
And
so,
one addition,
yes,
Michael, and
yes.
one addition, we start the sacred pentagram approach 2 days before the full moon.
Okay,
and
and
go
we'll have to let Michael know what time that will be. That's not a long meditation, but it helps keep us.
No, it is the whole day is about the approach. We have to align every one of us to the sacred energies of the full moon and the indications of that, what the full moon means. It's the group approach.
Okay, that's good. I'll tell you what,
You just have to look at the times with the other webinar events as well.
yeah, that'll help. Well, we've got a lot going on, but you can learn this way, friends. And this is the radio. This is late night radio, the radio about which DK prophesied and that he warned about and that he offered. And later there'll be even more. So let's take advantage of it. And when you're a member of the Moria Federation, you can't do everything here. No. You have to do your normal schoolwork and your normal thought, your normal reading and all the rest. But sometimes these kinds of programs can lead to a synthetic attitude. And a lot of things get brought together that you might not think of doing, simply the school work. Okay, anything else, Michael or Tuya? And okay, grateful for both of you and for other members of the team, Olivia BL, Joe Waltz, and we send you our love and blessings in this learning process. We will now convert this and make it available for you, and also the identify as being broadcast, or rather webinar from last night, is going to be available very soon. So you have to convert them. GoToMeeting puts in a bunch of its proprietary software. And what that means is you just can't play it on every computer. So conversion strips out that software, those codes, and allows you to play it on any computer, and then it becomes useful to you. Okay, so we'll be seeing you later, some of you anyway, later this evening, and also tomorrow night, etc., and for the full moon activities, which are coming right up quite soon. Okay, many blessings and lots and lots of love to you. Right now, we need the love, on this second ray planet. And in this second ray solar system, we really need that. I won't go with the song and say, oh, well, all you need is love, but it's really a big one. It's really a big one, and more is gathering to be infused into us and expressed outward. Okay, that's going to be it. For now.